Welcome to another Man in Black vlog. It's time to talk about Blair Witch 3 in space. Don't waste your money on Apollo 18. Do not waste your money on Apollo 18. If someone buys you a ticket, think really hard before you go. That better be some good popcorn, some good company, maybe some good something after the movie, because you're not going to have a good time when you're watching the screen. If someone pays you to watch it, okay, it's not that terrible that if they pay you to watch it, you can't go. That said, I'm probably going to make about 3 cents on this video, and if that movie went on another 30 minutes, I would not have been able to control the urge to walk out. I wanted to walk out about 30 minutes in because I knew at that point it was not going to be a good movie. First of all, found footage movies. Now, there are people who love them. This is probably, I want to say, the third I've ever seen. There's a good reason for that. I just can't get into them. They're just, the quasi-realisticness does not help them. Now, take all the flaws of found footage movies, because I'm sure you could name a few. You know, the inane blather that you witness, the things happening off, things happening off screen because the characters don't see them. Stupid things like hearing the breathing of, actually, I'm not even sure now, because at first I thought there was a monster and you heard that breathing, and I was wondering why you could hear the breathing in the camera. There was not a monster in that way. It wasn't a Frankenstein, Wolfman, Jason Voorhees, Dracula, Michael Myers. It wasn't any of those types of monsters. So what was breathing? The sound designer, I guess. They just wanted to make it sound suspenseful. So there was breathing for no fucking reason. But take all the flaws of found footage movies. I kind of just lost my train of thought because there was a car honking outside and now I'm kind of distracted. Take all of the flaws of found footage movies. Now I want you to picture everything you've ever seen of footage taken from astronauts on the moon. Well, first of all, now you know more than the people who made this movie. If you're picturing that footage, you're probably picturing the way you walk across the moon in very low gravity, kind of bouncy, kind of slow motion. You know, kind of different from the way you move on Earth. Director of this movie either didn't know or didn't care. They just walked like normal, ran like normal, shambled along out of breath the way normal people do on Earth. Ever hear about how when they twist the flag a little bit so it waves, so that it's forever waving because there's nothing really to make it stop? They don't do that. They just make video footage look like photograph footage because the moon isn't a boring enough place. Which brings us to why I'm bringing all this up. Footage taken from the moon is boring. That's not to knock on the astronauts. That's not to knock on the accomplishments involved in getting there. But there's no noise for obvious reasons. There's not much in the way of motion. There's not much in the way of video quality because they carried it through space to get there. It's a very low quality video that you use only when you need to show what's going on. You don't watch that for an hour and a half for entertainment. I don't care what's happening on screen. Not much is happening on screen. I mean, this goes back to found footage movies, but there's a lot of nothing. A lot of talking. Not very interesting talking, but a lot of talking. Some of it's talking to the camera. Some of it's talking to other people. Most of it is not very interesting. Okay, this is Apollo 18 we're talking about. Most of it's not interesting at all. None of it is very interesting. So now we've got all the flaws of found footage movies. You know, the ones where the flaw... I don't want to say this as it's a found footage movie and therefore it's flawed, because found footage movies have flaws. I'm saying every flaw you can think of in found footage movies, that's what makes up this movie. But, okay. Now that we've gotten onto that, now let's talk about other things. Well, the movie almost ended about 20 minutes in. Because they got in, they accomplished their mission, they were going to go home. But it's a bad horror movie. So there's a cliche malfunction. If there weren't for the cliche malfunction, it never would have gone outside, never would have been exposed to the problem, would have gotten home, everything would have been fine and dandy. So they had to add contrived bullshit because, you know, horror movie, bad horror movie. That type of shit is mandatory in bad horror movies. It's generally difficult to avoid in good horror movies. But here, you can pretty much predict everything that's going to happen. I mean, if there's a found footage movie formula, it follows it. Cliche horror movie formula, it follows it. Two people trapped alone in a scary place, it follows it. I've never thought, you know what, no, I'm not even going to say that line because it pays this movie too much credit. But what else can I say before I get to the spoiling part? Well, okay, I'll say this. The premise was interesting. The idea of being on the moon, discovering something terrible, and that being the reason why the U.S. has never wanted to return to the moon. That's the premise. It was passable. In the hands of a decent writer, or a decent director, should I say a decent writer and a decent director, could have been a good movie. Even found footage, they could have found a way to make it decent. It would have been the footage would have been a little less believable, but I knew 30 minutes into this movie the only way to save it would be to completely give up the found footage thing. And that's not just the part of me that prefers regular movies. That's just the way this movie is carried out. There would be no way it could be a good movie unless they completely abandoned the found footage thing about 45 minutes in. I know some movies have done that. I know Mizio had complaints about Fourth Kind doing that kind of thing. It might not have made this a great movie. It would have made it a better movie. There might have been something interesting happening. So that's about my non-spoiler comments. Pause the movie if you actually care about spoilers, and then hit play because there's not a good movie to spoil. Most of this movie is predictable to a T. You can sit there and be like, alright, movie could be over, but hey, we got too much time left, so something catastrophic is going to happen. Oh, he's home free. Something bad is going to happen. So, it's entirely too formulaic. Worst of all, there's sequel bait. Because, they think we want another one. Now, let me explain the sequel bait. Everyone dies. It's not really a spoiler. It's a found footage movie. Sorry, one second. Everyone dies. And they do that montage at the end that they sometimes do. Normally it's about what people went on to do afterward. This is the story that the government gave their families, because obviously it's a secret mission and all that bullshit. In the end, well, oh, by the way, moon rocks have to do with the problem of the movie. Okay. Yeah, the spoilers are going to get progressively more spoilery as we go along, but moon rocks have to do with the problem. So they end this montage with, this is how many moon rocks have been brought back from the Apollo missions. This is how many have been given to foreign dignitaries. The moon rocks are a lot of moon rocks are missing or stolen. So basically the idea is, if this movie sells enough, God forbid, if this movie sells enough, there'll be a sequel. It'll be Blair Witch in space on Earth. Because somebody wants to see that. Maybe. Somewhere. With brain damage. Drunk. And high on heroin. Somebody might be in that situation. I hope not. You gotta be pretty damn desperate. That's after you cut the wrists, but before you blow up your house. You know, somewhere in there. That's about how desperate you'd have to be to actually want there to be a sequel like that. Alright, so let's get on to these little fucks. Okay. There are little spider things that I guess they curl up into moon rocks, and then they can open back up when they feel like it, or something to that effect. And these are the creatures of the movie. They make up all the craters on the moon. Don't ask me why. And they go inside you and you get infected, and I guess their infection kind of fucks with your mind and makes you susceptible to their desires, and they want to take over the earth or some bullshit. I don't really think they thought that far ahead. I'd rather not expend that much thought into it, because I really don't think they did. And if they did, it was... Sorry, I keep bumping the chair that the camera's on. But there's nothing original about anything I just said, even if they did put that much thought into it. Oh, right, I keep forgetting to bring this up. I was asked, is this movie scary? Well, there's about 3 jump scares in it. If jump scares are your thing, then you might get about 15 seconds of enjoyment from this movie. If you've never seen a horror... That's too much of a compliment. If you've never seen a horror-esque movie, never heard of horror cliches, believe it's real, then it might be a little scary until you watch anything else. And also, okay, the characters. The closest thing anybody comes to being interesting is not wanting to leave the guy behind. And we all know how that type of shit goes. I would have cared about this character if he had been the type to say, you know what? It's too late for me. I'm infected with these spider rock bullshit things. And by the way, when I saw them talking about the rocks, I really hoped there would be like fucking moon golems, rock biter, something like that. That would have been it. That would have been cool. Would have been interesting. Somehow they managed to make spiders and living rocks both boring as shit. Don't ask me how. But where was I? If the character here had realized, hey, if I get to Earth, I'm going to unleash these things on all of civilization. I'm just going to stay here for a couple more hours, or go out in my suit for a couple minutes and die of oxygen asphyxiation. Yes, it's not exactly a pleasant way to go, but You're not dooming mankind with your own selfishness by doing it. So yeah, kind of keeps me from giving a fuck about the character, because that's an asshole move. That is a dick move. You know, kind of like recommending Apollo 18 to a friend. That's a dick move. That's about all I gotta say about this movie. Fuck this movie. It's the first time I ever walked into a theater and paid money and walked out regretting that fact. Movies are expensive, yes, but usually it's a good time. Even if the food is even if you don't want to buy the food because it costs too much, even if you spend 4 hours sitting in the parking lot trying to sober down so you can drive, even if it's Spider-Man 3, even if it's Green Lantern, you usually walk out like, you know what, I'm glad I walked in and watched this movie. It was a decent time. I watched the movie in the theater. That was a benefit, a little bit of a bonus that the DVD wouldn't have. You enjoyed watching it in the theater. Not this. I walked out of this movie. By the way, my choices at this time of the day, unless I wanted to wait about 2 or 3 hours, were Shark Night, which, just looking at the premise, I would say $2 bargain bin movie at Walmart. So I didn't want to spend 3D. I didn't want to watch it in 3D because it's extra for 3D. Why watch a bargain bin movie in 3D if there's anything else? So I saw the poster for Apollo 18. I'm like, you know what? Has to be better than Shark Night. It's not better than Shark Night. I've never seen Shark Night. I can tell you right now it's not better than Shark Night. But I walked out and I sincerely wished that I had never spent a penny. If I had spent $1.15 on this movie, I would have considered it a waste of time. That would be it. I spent $8.50 matinee price for this movie. I haven't been to a matinee in years. It should be a heavy discount for me. I feel ripped off. Not by the studio, the movie theater doesn't know any better. By the people who made this fucking movie. What the fuck, guys? What the fuck? What the fuck is this movie? I mean, found footage shouldn't be that hard to make. If you're making it for found footage fans, go out with your personal camera, shoot some footage, pretend to die, and you got a fucking movie. Don't make bullshit, do something original, something interesting. Fuck, have you ever heard of a movie being put in space and that made it more boring? It happened to this movie. Was Leprechaun in space more boring than a regular Leprechaun? Probably not. Was Jason in space more boring? Not really. Hellraiser 4? Okay, it wasn't as good as the first 3 movies, but being in space did not make it boring. That's about it for my in-space comparisons with horror anyway. But being in space is supposed to be good for cheesy fun and all that shit. No, not this. You get to see astronauts standing around talking, and that's about it. So, yeah, don't spend money on this movie. Don't suggest your friends spend money on this movie. Forget about this fucking movie. Man in Black out.